welcome back. It's so good to be back on our videos. We are continuing our unit on ancient Greece. We're in part 2 now. And now that we've learned a little bit about how ancient Greece was set up and our geography and culture and all that good stuff, now we're going to get to take a look at some of the advancements and accomplishments of ancient Greece. And this is really important because the Greeks made advancements that continue to shape our world today. Now, Lesson 1 and Lesson 2 are very short, so we're actually collapsing them into one video. So we expect that when you come in on Monday, you have both your Lesson 1 and Lesson 2 video notes done. Easy peasy, should go fast, but that is our expectation. If they're not, you will not be meeting expectations. You will not be getting the credit that you want. So please be sure that you have both pages of that done, and we are going to go over that in class, okay? So, hang tight, let's dive right in.
All right, guys, so we just talked about ancient Greece and we talked all about government. And we know that different city-states had different beliefs in the way they ran their city-state, politically speaking. But what we're going to learn is that Greek beliefs were actually a common shared idea with different city-states. So, they all spoke the Greek language. They shared beliefs and traditions that were the same, meaning, you'll talk about it in the next slide, but beliefs and traditions with Greek gods and even how they celebrate the gods. And then they also believed in the same myths. Now, a myth is a traditional story about gods and heroes. So, all of these things the city-states have in common, and this is what makes Greek people united, and it was a common culture that did that. I need you to circle this. Greek people were united by a common culture, okay? So, prepare yourself. We're going to talk about Greek gods and goddesses and their stories that they like to believe in.
Who were the Greek gods? The Greek gods believed in gods and goddesses. In Greek myths, the gods had great powers but acted like humans. In the Greeks' eyes, the gods married, had children, got jealous, and started wars. The Greeks believed the 12 most important gods lived on Mount Olympus, Greece's highest mountain. To win the favor of their god, the people of the city-state performed rituals. People performed these rituals in hopes that the god would reward them. They believed these gods that they worshipped could strongly influence daily life. All Greeks worshipped Zeus as their chief god. In other words, he was the king of the gods. Greeks participated in athletic competitions for the greater glory of Zeus, and they took place in Olympia and were called the Olympic Games. Many of you have asked, is this where we get the Olympic Games from? And the answer is yes, it is.
So the Greeks actually believed that each person had a fate or a destiny. And no matter what they did, no matter the choices they made, it didn't matter because it was already predetermined by the gods. The gods already had a plan for their life. So to find out about their future, Greeks would actually visit an oracle, or what is known as a sacred shrine, where a priest or priestess spoke for God. And in this oracle, people would actually, the priest or priestess, would give a Greek a message about their future and what to expect. So in the picture over here, we actually have an example of a priestess speaking to a Greek about their future. So I want you to underline sacred shrine where a priest spoke to a priestess for a god. That is a vocabulary term. Make sure you know it. Okay?
So everybody loves a good story, and the Greeks were no exception. Some of the stories that we love best today are actually based all the way back in ancient Greece with some of their epics and fables, okay? So Greek poems and stories, they're some of the oldest literature that we have written down in Western civilization, so we can learn so much from them. The first Greek stories were called epics. And a poem named Homer wrote 2 of the greatest epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And these were inspired by the Trojan War. And they tell this story of Odysseus, a Greek hero who is making his way back to Greece, but he displeases the gods. And it tells the story of all the different trials and tribulations that he has to go through. So think of a Marvel or superhero movie today and all of the different problems that they face. That's going to be kind of the ancient version of a Marvel movie would be these epics, these epic heroes. And they were more than stories to the Greeks. They served as inspiration for the Greeks as to how to be courageous and be the very best person they could be. They gave the Greeks role models and somebody to look up to. And we're going to look at more epics and stories in class so that you get kind of a good feeling for this. But even today, these stories resonate. That means they make sense with us. We can get something out of them. So that's a great example of cultural diffusion. Another type of Greek story that you might have heard of already is a fable. Fables were created by a man named Aesop around 550 BC. And these fables are short stories, maybe a page or two, that taught a moral or useful lesson. Fables often used animals that speak and act like humans to get their point across. So, for example, you might have heard the story of the boy who cried wolf. And, it's about a little boy who he tells lies all the time, and then when he tells the truth, no one believes him. You also might have heard the stories of the ants and the grasshopper, where the ants are planning and plotting and making sure they have everything they need for winter, and the grasshopper is just foolishly going through, and he manages to get himself in trouble. Animals are a little bit more easy to relate to, and we don't kind of feel guilty when we have a person. And so these were great stories for children and for adults that everyone could relate to and that everyone could get something out of. So I've given you one or two reasons why Aesop might have chosen to use animals as the main characters in his fables. Everything from the tortoise and the hare to the ant and the grasshopper and bunches of others. I want you to write down your hypothesis. Why do you think most of Aesop's characters were animals rather than humans? Maybe you have an idea that's different than what I came up with. Let's get at least one good full paragraph and give examples of fables you know to really make your point well known.
The impact of Greek drama. The ancient Greeks created and performed the first dramas. In ancient Greece, there were two types of dramas, tragedy and comedy, and were always performed on stage. Greek art and architecture. The ancient Greeks really excelled in arts and architecture. Classical Greek art set high standards of beauty and is admired today. These artists were dedicated to capturing the human form in their art. Every Greek city-state had a temple dedicated to a god or a goddess that they worshipped. This temple would also contain a statue of that god. Large columns supported many Greek buildings and have inspired famous buildings in the United States, such as the White House. On your packet, you can see the Greek Parthenon structure right there, and the columns that they used in it. This idea spread to the United States and can be seen in the Lincoln Memorial. So what do we call this spreading of ideas, folks? Say it with me. Cultural diffusion.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
All right, so let's keep on rolling. Remember, we're going to continue with our video notes. So this is going to be lesson 2, and we're going to be talking about the Greek mind. Okay, so it matters because ancient Greeks made lasting contributions in the arts, philosophy, and science. So let's get to it.
The great Greek thinkers created the study of philosophy, which means the love of wisdom. These Greek philosophers pondered questions about the truth and developed the study of science and math.
When we talk about the ancient Greek philosophers, there are some that are really, really crucial and important, and you can't really get around thinking about the world without dealing with these gentlemen's ideas. Our first ancient Greek philosopher that we're going to look at is Socrates. Now, Socrates was from Athens. He created the Socratic method, and he taught his students by asking questions. I know this probably drives you crazy when we do this, but he asked questions like, why and how do you know that? How did you reach that point? And he believed that by asking all those questions, then you would come to a deeper understanding of how you thought. Now, unlike most people in the ancient world, he thought the gods were make-believe. So this is huge, guys. He was not polytheistic. He believed in what he could touch and feel and see and hear, and he didn't think that the gods fit into that category. Put a star by that because that makes him pretty unique and special in the ancient world. Hopefully your star's better than mine. That one's a little weird. Because he thought this, the people in ancient Athens thought that he was corrupting the youth that he taught. And in fact, there was a whole trial and he was put to death for corrupting the youth of Athens and spreading his beliefs about the fact that the gods didn't exist. And so when he was sentenced to death, he chose to drink hemlock, which is a type of poison. And he was able to kind of make a statement with his death, but he was put to death for questioning the ideas of the people in his community. Now, one of his students, Plato, not Plato, Plato, continued his ideas even faced with this difficulty. So he was a student of Socrates. And Plato created really the first school that we know of, called the Academy. And this was a school for philosophy where he took Socrates' ideas and spread it to the youth of Athens. We've already talked about how boys in Athens had a really well-rounded education. And they thought about war, but they also thought about peace and government and all sorts of things. So Plato was one of the first teachers that really kind of brought these ideas forward. And he wrote a book called The Republic, which was all about how an ideal government should work. And so he wanted to kind of spread his ideas about how the world should work. One of his students, Aristotle, took it even further. Aristotle wrote over 200 books. I can barely write like a Facebook status or a Twitter update. You can only imagine him writing 200 books here. And his most famous book is called Politics. And he went even further than Plato, and he defined the 3 basic types of government: a democracy, a tyranny, and an oligarchy. And we know all about democracies and tyrannies. There's my last one, tyrannies and oligarchies. Okay? And he ended up teaching Alexander the Great, who was another leader that we're going to learn about more in section 3 and section 4. So these ideas of these 3 gentlemen, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, shaped the larger world in a big way that we're going to talk more about.
All right, guys, so in ancient Greece, a lot of times they would actually use their mind and use their education to think about history. And thanks to a man named Herodotus, we know all about the Peloponnesian War. So did you ever wonder how we know these details? Well, thanks to this guy, we know. He actually traveled all over collecting interviews and writing a history book. He made sure all the stories were true. That is why he is known as the father of history. Please underline father of history and please circle his name on your notes. It is important. After all, we are in history class, right? All right, so just off to the side, that's his name in Greek. Just a fun little fact for you. So moving on, we have science and math that are major accomplishments for the ancient Greeks. And first, I want to talk about Hippocrates, and we know him as the father of medicine. He actually created the Hippocratic Oath, which were considered rules for doctors. And then we have Pythagoras. Now, Pythagoras created the formula for the length of a triangle. Okay, so eventually you will learn about that in math, but for now it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You're welcome. Okay, really quick, jumping back to Hippocrates. I just want to give you some fun facts about the Hippocratic Oath, just in case some of you want to be doctors one day. So the Hippocratic Oath was created as a list of rules about how doctors should treat their patients. Doctors should do their best to help their patients. I mean, in any job, we should want to do that, but especially doctors who are taking care of people and their health, right? And then the Hippocratic Oath is actually still honored today. They have certain protocols that they follow to, treat their patients the absolute best that they can. Okay, so that is about history. We got a little math and a little bit of science up in here. All right. So now let's talk about your hot question. Which Greek philosopher do you think is most important and why? If you want to include one of the mathematicians or one of the scientists on here, go ahead and do so, but make sure you are justifying your answer and answering the why. Okay? Good luck.